Joining me now is Nick Cater from the Menzies Research Centre, also a senior columnist with The Australian. Nick, let's start with this piece from Alan Kohler in the New Daily. He says it's time for Australia to switch off gas if it wants to achieve its net zero emission target, saying we should pay households to switch their gas appliances to electric. And we should also pay cattle farmers to either offset their methane or remove it in some way. Kohler also writes, the question is going to be whether and how to encourage or force the gas companies to keep supplying the laggards who like cooking and heating with gas while they're persuaded or subsidised to buy a better electric induction stove. Nick, Victoria is already sadly heading down this road. We've banned new gas connections in new homes that are being built. But is this war on gas going to achieve anything useful for the Australian population?
It's going to achieve nothing useful except make it harder for people to get by and live. I mean, with the cost of living as it is Mr. Kohler on his well-paid job, whatever he gets paid, saying, oh, well, I'm sorry, you've got to go and buy a new cooker? It is absurd because this whole war on gas is absurd. I mean, here in Europe, I'm in London at the moment, but they've just had a European election. And the big issue was, one of the big issues was immigration, the second was energy. And what people were saying was, we don't want to go along with this. And the whole tide of debate has changed. And it's all because of gas, Rita, because they were buying gas from Russia, as you know, and it went through the roof. You need gas in the interim. I mean, we could put nuclear in right away. We haven't got it. But in the meantime, we're going to need gas to power up our electricity system. We're going to need it to make fertiliser for farmers. We're going to need it for industrial processes. You know, this green hydrogen thing is some dream in the heads of people like Alan Kohler. It's a long way down the track. You know, just get real is what I'd say on this, besides which it'll do absolutely zero to help the planet. Zero. Or so small that you can't even read it. You know, it's tiny.
You mentioned the EU elections. Green and left-leaning parties took a beating. We've had so-called far-right parties making huge gains. They campaigned not just against immigration, Nick, but also they campaigned against net zero policies. Should our politicians take note of what is happening across Europe?
Absolutely they should, because the two issues are big in Australia. I mean, I think if you were to sum up the European vote, people were saying no to net zero, yes to no net immigration. You know, they don't want more immigration and the whole debate over net zero and the cost it's adding to people, the pain it's putting on farmers, the electricity bills have gone through the roof in countries like Germany and Ireland where they're heavily reliant on gas. You know, this whole thing is just collapsing very quickly in Europe. Most countries are now admitting they're not going to get to their 2030 targets because they can't. The whole thing is impossible in the time frame. And sooner or later, of course, Australia will come to that position. Even Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen might. I suspect they won't come to it till about 2029. But, you know, it's not going to happen. You cannot meet those targets in that space of time with the technology we have. Full stop. Any engineer will tell you that.
Now, you wrote a fantastic piece for the Oz warning Australia's climate lobby that ambitious green energy targets that they're trying to implement here have not worked in Germany. Tell me about what's happened in Germany, because they turned their back on nuclear. They went down the renewables road hard, and the results have been almost catastrophic.
It's been disastrous for Germany. I mean, this is, you know, they were the poster child, Europe's poster child of green energy. And I caught the train from Hamburg to Berlin, and every field, it seems, is covered in solar panels and windmills, but it's not doing the trick, as they found out, you know, when the gas supply went up, you know, the price of gas went up, they were just really, really hurt. And now the electricity price in Germany is the highest in Europe. It's about twice as high as it is across the water there in Sweden, where they're running on nuclear and hydroelectricity. And this is affecting industry. 30% of German businesses told their big Chamber of Commerce in a survey that they were looking to relocate offshore. And this is happening. You can see German industry is declining very quickly, and they're moving when they can to places where there is cheaper electricity. It's been a disaster for Germany, and it's bringing about their industrial collapse. So once that great country where we used to, we always used to go there for Audis and washing machines. You won't be getting those from Germany for much longer because they've basically stuffed it all up.
And all entirely self-inflicted and I would say predictable. And they were warned. They were warned about the path they were taking. They were warned that they were far too reliant on Russian energy. I remember Trump warning them during a speech, and the German contingent there, I think it was at the UN, was sitting there snickering like schoolgirls instead of actually heeding the warning. They were told and they've ignored it, and it would be absolutely absurd for us to ignore what's happening in Germany at the moment, Nick.
It would. And, I made the point in the column. It's now 12 years since Angela Merkel mysteriously, well, actually under green pressure, said we're going to phase out our nuclear plants. So they've had 12 years to work out how to power their electricity grid without nuclear, without using coal, without using gas. And these are the German engineers, the same German engineers that gave you Vorsprung durch Technik. They are the best in the world, and they can't work it out. And the country is suffering as a result. They've just reopened 8 coal mines in the last 2 years, would you believe, because it's cheaper than getting gas in from overseas. They actually knocked down 1 wind farm to dig up some coal. That's telling you something, isn't it? But, somehow Chris Bowen, he was in Germany last year. He didn't spot any of this, apparently. He just thinks that Germany is the great vision of the future we have to follow. Dream on, Mr. Bowen, dream on.
Well, we're hearing that the coalition is wargaming the possibility of an early election as the Prime Minister it prepares to fight on energy as a major issue. Dutton's gaining. Recent news poll, two-party preferred, it was 50-50. The Libs' primary vote had gone up. And the Australian reveals that Anthony Albanese is going to use even higher carbon emission targets to fight the coalition. Do you see that as a winning strategy, Nick? Because much of the media is already attacking Peter Dutton for restarting the climate wars, as they call it. We've got elements of the business sector also campaigning for what they call certainty. Can Dutton's strategy work if he has the media and big business against him?
Look, what they're trying to do, what business and Labor, and I think of those as one block these days, what they are trying to do is return to the debate of, oh, you're a climate denier. Now, that debate ended the moment that the coalition signed up to Zero 2050, for better or worse, right? Now it's all about how you get there and how expensive it is. And people know. This is a distraction from Labor. Let's make this about the climate wars again, so that nobody sort of asks awkward questions like, what happened to that $275 that you promised you were going to take off my electricity bill? Your Labor is just desperate on this. And it won't work, Rita, because most people in Australia, as we know, if you do a survey on this, actual climate change and zero emissions is way down their list of concerns right now, way down. And I think it's a recipe for losing, because I think we're going to see the same trend that we have here in Europe, that people are just going to switch away from green parties and say, well, you're off with the fairies, we're not going there with you. We're just not going there.
Now, you're in London. The election there is just a matter of weeks away. What's your feeling? We're looking at a Labor landslide. All the polls are indicating that. Farage has entered the race quite late. If you were a betting man, what would your prediction be?
Well, I wouldn't be putting any money on Rishi Sunak right now. I think the way the betting is running here is how many seats are the Tories going to end up with. And there are people seriously saying it'll be fewer than 100 seats. That'll be their worst result, I think, since the beginning of the last century. It's going to be a landslide for Labor. The question is how big is that landslide and how much of the Tory party is left. Nigel Farage's party, of course, is making big inroads into the Tory vote, and in a first-past-the-post system, that's really damaging. But Farage himself will not win many seats, 3, 4, I would predict at most, because of the way the boundaries fall and the way the election plays out. But he'll help, push the Tories into oblivion. Look, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, a government that's been in as long as they have, no government has had 5 terms in Britain, I think, for almost 200 years. So they're not going, they couldn't expect 5 terms in the best of times, and so they're gone. But it would be nice to see them having at least be the official opposition and not give that away to the Lib Dems, which is a real possibility if they do as badly as the worst. The worst predictions are.
Well, let it be a warning to
the opposition party.
That's true, but let it be a warning to Conservative parties everywhere, including here, including our state Liberal parties, that this is what happens when you completely lose sight of your principles and govern like Labor light. You just have no supporter base to speak of. Nick Cater, thank you so much for your time this evening.